Please welcome your panelists for eSports. Will competitive gaming be the next major sport? Moderated by lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat, Dean Takahashi.
Yeah, welcome to our panel. I'm very grateful to be moderating this session. My name is Dean Takahashi. I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat. We're a tech news and gaming publication. I've been at it for 10 years, and I've also been writing about games for about 22 years now. And it's been very interesting to watch esports evolve during that whole time. And I'd also like to have my panelists introduce themselves as well, starting with Kent at this end.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kent Wakeford. I am one of the co-founders and owners of an esports organization called KSV. We own a number of esports teams around the world. We have teams located in China, Korea, and playing in Los Angeles. And our teams cover most of the major esports out there, including the Overwatch League, League of Legends, and a number of other games like PUBG, Heroes of the Storm, etc.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Nate Nanzer. I'm commissioner of the Overwatch League at Activision Blizzard. That's what all this stuff is over here. There's guys floating around there. If you have questions, ask them. Overwatch League is a global professional esports league based on the game Overwatch, made by Blizzard Entertainment. We have 12 city-based teams, of which Kent is one of the owners of the Seoul Dynasty, and Steve down at the end, who you'll meet in a minute, one of the owners of the LA Valiant. City-based teams. We play all of our matches currently at the Blizzard Arena in Los Angeles at Burbank Studios, but in the future we'll be moving to full home and away, so when Kent and Steve play each other, that game's going to get played in either Seoul or LA.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ramon Hermann. I currently work at Tencent with a heavy focus on mobile esports. I've been in the video games industry for a bit over 15 years at this point, so I do remember the very humble beginnings of esports. One of the first events I was helping organize, the audience probably would have fit into this venue 3 times over with room to spare. NVIDIA was the proud title sponsor by donating 1 singular graphics card. And I think my overall budget was $40K. So we've definitely come a long way since.
Ann?
Great. Hello, my name is Ann Hand. I'm the CEO of Super League Gaming. Super League is founded about 3 years ago under the premise that with all the explosion of esports at the professional level, that it was inevitable, excuse me, that a little league and a minor league system would emerge. And so think of us as a way to really harness the up-and-coming fan base for professional esports, but also provide an aspirational path to the pros.
Hi, I'm Steve Cohen. Wear multiple hats, but for purposes of this, I'm Chief Strategy Officer for AEG. We're a worldwide entertainment company, primarily in sports and live entertainment. We have about 27,000 employees dotted around the world. We operate on 5 continents, and we have the great fortune of being a stakeholder in Immortals, and because of that, we have a meaningful stake in the LA Valiant, which is part of the Overwatch League.
Great, thank you. So esports is expected to grow 38% to 906 million in 2018, according to the market researcher Newzoo, and grow to 1.65 billion by 2021. And you know, those are big numbers, but that's actually less than 1% of the global gaming business, which is at $138 billion in 2018, growing to $180 billion by 2021. So you can think of that percentage as a very interesting, you know, a number as far as opportunity goes, or overhype, right? You know, we're talking about less than 1% of the game industry that is actually catching so much attention this year. Just in the past year, really. Maybe a little longer than that, it's gotten attention. I want to ask Kent to maybe paint more of a picture of what kind of investment has been going on with esports, and what are the sort of multiple layers of that investment as well.
Sure. So I think one of the reasons why we're all in this industry and in this sport together is the rapid increase of growth across multiple dimensions. Dean touched on revenue, right? So revenue growing from 38% year over year to 2018. It's growing from 900 million to estimates are 1.4 to 2.4 billion by 2020. That's a lot of growth. More interesting is on the audience size. So the audience size for esports today is about 380 million people around the world, growing to about 550 million people by 2021. To put this in perspective, the audience for esports by 2020 is expected to be greater than all other US professional sports with the exception of the NFL. Right? I mean, so that's an interesting stat to put into kind of keep in the back of your mind. Another is, there was a recent championship game played within esports in a game called League of Legends that was held at the Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing. That was the Olympic Stadium. Sold out that stadium within minutes with 40,000 attendees, but it had 60 million people watching that championship. 60 million. That's second only to the Super Bowl at 110 plus million. So you think about the size of this industry and the opportunity, and you look at any other professional traditional sports with, and you think about from an investment perspective, the valuations that professional sports teams have, there is a big white space of opportunity, which has led to a lot of capital inflow into kind of the esports space and created a lot of opportunities both for kind of the team owners as well as the leagues and the other game publishers. So it's a big reason why we invested and why we continue to see a lot more capital flowing into the esports space.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, there's a lot of investment going into venues as well, these places where these events are going to be held. Right?
Yes, and just a riff on what was just mentioned. We're all here in some part because of the effects of the law of numbers, and that's meaningful. And I can regale you all with within the last year selling out multiple nights at Mercedes-Benz in Shanghai or in Hamburg or at Barclays with esports events. And that's all very compelling, and that's part of the reason why we're in the game. But at its core, there's also this element of the experiential, and that to us is very important. That's what creates a stickiness that we can drive in all sorts of directions and makes it compelling not only for the fan base, but for our sponsors, our partners, the people we collaborate with at all parts of the continuum on the revenue scale. And so from that perspective, we're very focused with our venues, whether they be smaller venues in the 250-person category to a full-blown arena or stadium and everything in between, to making sure that there are customized elements that enhance the experience for everybody in the ecosystem, because that's what's going to make it something that amplifies the success of the people that are doing it in their communities more at a locally based level, but also affords the opportunity for integration and activation in a world where conventional advertising or sponsorship or whatever you want to call it has been completely disintermediated and is lacking credibility.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to riff in as well on investments?
I mean, it was something I'll add. The Overwatch League was, we were very thoughtful from the beginning of trying to create a league that would welcome investment. So esports, I think, for a long time in the old days that Ramon mentioned earlier, where we had 30 people in a room on CRT monitors, a lot of that activity was grassroots, organic activity that the community was driving. And publishers really viewed it as engagement marketing for the games. It wasn't viewed as a standalone business opportunity. On the Overwatch League, we saw an opportunity with a new game. It was our first new intellectual property in 17 years. It was an opportunity to build something from the beginning of the game's life cycle. And it was a game that was really well suited to team sports, 6v6 game. And we saw through events that we do like BlizzCon, which is sort of the Super Bowl of Blizzard esports, which we put on every November in Anaheim. We sell 25,000 tickets at $200 each in about 6 seconds. with other 80,000, 90,000 people in the queue trying to buy those tickets. So we see incredible engagement with our events, and we know that there's something powerful about experiencing esports live. In the same way that I was never a soccer fan until I went to a Premier League game in London, and then I was like, oh, I get it. Same thing with esports. It's competition, and it's more fun to watch competition when you're there and you're connected with other fans. You have that shared experience. So we saw an opportunity to bring that to more fans around the world by geolocating the teams, and then also opening up investment opportunity for people like Kent and Steve and others to really bring them along as partners in building a league, and having them come and invest in making sure that the league is driving significant revenue that's shared with the teams, that the teams have opportunity to create new revenue streams that don't exist in esports. So we've been very thoughtful about how do we create a esport league that's very welcoming to investment, and I think you're seeing that more and more across the industry as well.
We should point out that just before this happened, the question was always there, why would anybody ever want to watch a game instead of play it, right? And then we had Twitch come along, right? And Twitch is now, well above 150 million people a month watching people do other things, right? Watching live streams, watching esports events, watching people play games. And so that habit got established, and that had to happen before something like the Overwatch League was even possible.
That's right, but I'd also ask, why would anyone ever watch golf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you would watch golf because you play golf or you've played golf, and there's something about this thing that I like to do, this activity. It's only natural that I want to see who's the best in the world at this thing that I love to do. Esports is no different. We have over 35 million people play Overwatch. It's only natural that they want to know who's the best in the world at this game that I spend countless hours of my life playing.
That's right. Just to jump in a little bit on the valuation and the infrastructure side. So, when I see that stat about it being a $1 billion industry, I think that is, not only does it show the potential huge upside of the category of esports, but it's also really focused on that professional level. So that's like quantifying what baseball is worth globally and only talking about the value of Major League Baseball. So to me, there's just a huge amount of growth and opportunities that aren't even being captured right now in those estimates. As far as the investment side, what's been kind of fascinating for us is more of the mainstream kind of esports play is the way we've attracted some non-traditional investors. So for example, companies like Nickelodeon have invested in us because we're running youth leagues. Cinemark has invested in us. Why? Because movie theaters are empty a lot. And actually, a movie theater makes for a pretty decent playing field for esports at an amateur level. So it's kind of fascinating to see how, to your point, the numbers don't lie, and it's really attracting a lot of interesting attention. But to me, being at this for 3 years, I think this year really is the year of infrastructure. I think this is the year where, through the great work that Overwatch has done with their league, and same for League of Legends, through the venue's role in this, and the localization of esports, this seems to be the year where the focus is really going to be on making sure we have sustainable leagues and sustainable venues and locations to really kind of dig in and kind of put down the stakes on it.
And just one more quick observation, and it plays a little bit to the historical stereotypes of who would want to watch this, right? I think there are a lot of people of a certain generation, and I'll pull myself into this category, who their rudimentary understanding of esports long ago was, well, it's a 15 or 16-year-old acne-faced boy in the basement with a screen just playing.
That's right.
Nothing is further from the truth. It is intensely community-based, and that is an incredible opportunity on so many levels, not only commercial but otherwise, and people want to be together. They want to be together to play, they want to be together to watch and to participate, and that creates for us, from an experiential basis with our venues, huge opportunities to deploy in totally different ways that are different than some conventional sports. And so that's another sort of old tale that needs to be dispensed with in terms of what we're dealing with today.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just to mention really quickly, Super League's run about 2,000 events over the last couple of years. if I have any regrets, it's the way that I spoke about our target demographic in the early days, because there was a subtext or an apologetic tone to, isn't it great we're getting kids together, almost implying that they were a niche group that was disconnected, alone. Having run that many events, and we also run adult demographic events, kind of 16 and over events, we've got it all wrong, gang. Like, this is such a wide, diverse psychographic of people. We have girls who game. This should be a gender-neutral sport. We have people who, gamers have higher graduation rates and household incomes than traditional sports fans. So this is a very multifaceted, accomplished group. And the other big headline, gaming is no longer something you grow out of. It's a lifestyle decision. So people are going to come in and out of different game titles. Sometimes they're a player, sometimes they're a spectator. But it's time for us to debunk this idea we have about who a gamer is.
Okay.
So two comments. First on the spectator viewership, kind of a fun fact. So Nate has done an amazing job as commissioner of the Overwatch League, which you can see up here. Viewership for his Overwatch League on Thursday nights surpasses that of the viewership of NBA on Thursday nights. Like, think about that for a second. I mean, that you're talking about a massive audience. And segueing back into kind of the investment in capital, I mean, a lot of you are investors here. Investment into esports in 2017 grew 1,125% year over year. Massive inflow of capital, and that's just on the venture side. What you're also seeing...
Like, on my level, I write an esports story every week now, or twice a week, or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's about an investment, right?
But the other areas of investment that don't get reported as much, although they're often kind of buried in the headlines, is the investment from traditional sports moving into esports. It is a tectonic shift that is happening in the traditional sports industry. Right? If you look at the viewership numbers for a number of the traditional sports, they're going down. I've already talked about how the viewership...
Especially among those under 35.
Yeah. Especially with in the millennial group, there are more millennials watching esports than a number of the traditional sports out there.
We should mention some of these names, like, say the Philadelphia 76ers have invested, Robert Kraft has invested.
Yeah, so within the Overwatch League
Michael
itself,
Milken.
you have the Kraft family, the Kroenkes, so for those who don't know, the Kraft family, the Patriots, the Kroenkes with the Los Angeles Rams, the Wilpons with the New York Mets. That's and then you go into that's the
Ken
Overwatch.
Hirsch and Texas Rangers owner.
Yeah.
Right. Then you go into all
Dallas
the other
Fuel.
games, not to mention NBA 2K, which now has just about every NBA team has an esports component to their organization. Right. So this is a major shift in terms of what we have thought about as traditional sports. It is a change in the landscape, and it's a paradigm shift that's kind of been fueling this investment, that's been fueling Dean writing articles twice a week, every week. It's why we're all here today, is because it is such a radical shift in a massive industry, in the traditional sports industry.
And we're seeing the way that fandom plays out exactly the way you would expect it to play out in traditional sports. So we had this moment 2 weeks ago at the Blizzard Arena where I sort of like, oh, here, local esports is born. It was Steve's team, the LA Valiant, was playing Stan Kroenke's team, the LA Gladiators, and just organically, half of the audience was purple, half of the audience was green. They sort of self-selected which side they would sit on. They were, talking back and forth. It was amazing to see. We've already seen watch parties all across the country. The New York Excel, which is Jeff Wilpon's team, already has a supporters club that came together organically and goes to a bar in Brooklyn every single game to watch the matches together. So we're really seeing that the fandom is manifesting in exactly the same way that it manifests in traditional sports, and we're hearing from young fans that spend all their time watching other people play games on platforms like Twitch and YouTube, and are disengaging with traditional sports. That this is finally the New York team for them, or the LA team for them.
And I would point out that while it is a radical movement in some ways, it's not in others. So our Los Angeles Kings players, our Galaxy players, the Lakers players, they're avid fans of esports. Zlatan Ibrahimovic has a Valiant jersey. I'll tell you that right now. And so that's important because in these legacy sports, which have their own authentic credibility with their fan base, the real players within these sports themselves have an incredible credibility. They're competitors, they've worked hard, they're elite in what they do. And when they like something, their fan base associates with it. And part of what we're creating here and what the Overwatch League is an example of is creating a different kind of credibility and authenticity. And then you're not a Trojan horse any longer. You're part of the family. And when you're part of the family, you can introduce yourself in all sorts of ways and have different dialogue with your fan base than you can if you're just a commoditized product.
Great point.
Remember yesterday, Steve Ballmer was sitting in this spot, and in 2014, he bought the LA Clippers for $2 billion, right? And so I think we've done a good job getting everybody excited about the opportunity here. But we should flip the coin a little and talk about some of the challenges as well. And one of them is that Dennis Fong, who was at our GamesBeat conference a few weeks ago, pointed out he was the first competitive gamer. He won a Ferrari for being the best Quake player back 20 years ago or so, right? He said nobody's making money in esports, right? So that's a little detail we've left out so far, I guess, right? But comparisons to traditional sports, they happen a lot. Newzoo has pointed out that the average esports fan right now is spending about $4.58, right? And the NBA basketball fans are spending at least 3 times more. I think these raw numbers don't sound right, but that ratio is correct, that in a given year, the NBA fans are going to spend a lot more money. They're a lot more, say, passionate, at least, about tying their wallets to what they're interested in than esports fans right now. And so that's part of the challenge for esports. And so I'm going to kind of just throw that out for everybody to riff on as well. Like, what has to happen? What are the challenges? What parts of the business model still have to mature, I guess?
Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, I don't think that statement is generally right. From an event basis perspective, I can tell you right now there's plenty of folks in the ecosystem that are making money. When you sell out 3 days at a stadium for a final, there are lots of people making money. When you start talking about leagues and when you start talking about ARPU, first of all, on ARPU, yes, there's meaningful room for improvement. This is all new. And the leagues are new. And right now, the critical thing is building the proper infrastructure from the ground up to make sure this is sustainable for the long term. And you're going to have to make some investment at the front end to allow that system to prevail and thrive long term. And so if there's an expectation that you're going to be making big money in a newly found league day one, then you've got your own problems. You're in the wrong place for your investment.
So I'd like to add to that a little bit and zoom out maybe 1 or 2 steps, because typically what happens when we talk about esports is that we focus on the top tier competition and the tier 1 level leagues that are currently active. But I think for any ecosystem to really thrive and be sustainable, we need to look at what happens beneath those top tier levels. And those are some of the things that Anne touched on earlier. Looking at what does our little league look like? How do people grow into that space? Where do the future athletes come from? Where do they grow up? How do they start acquiring their specific preferences? How do we grow fandom? One of the areas I was previously working on while I was at Riot Games was the collegiate space. And I think college is such a great blueprint for how sports can work, and especially the US ecosystem, because you already have all those different things in place, and really esports fits into that narrative perfectly. Riot had built out a club program that I think had grown to 800 colleges having clubs. I believe Blizzard has a very similar program in place. Running leagues in that space, there being sponsorships being paid out to students, but more interestingly, colleges have started to set up sponsorships and scholarships on their own to attract students to join their competitive teams, to participate in those leagues. And one of the most exciting projects for me to work on was to actually get the Big Ten Conference on board to run a full season for 12 of their 14 membership schools and have them compete. It was an interesting experience flying out to Chicago to talk to the commissioners of their sports groups and getting them to understand as to what is happening on their campuses, what students are doing these days. We talked a bit earlier about maybe the age gap, and I think if it wasn't for the fact that I'm working inside that space and probably have 15, 16-year-olds calling me out every week about the things I'm not doing right and not understanding, I would probably have a huge disconnect to that space. But it became very apparent to me when talking to some of the existing people that work in traditional sports that maybe the last time they played a computer game was in the 80s doing Pac-Man or something, right? So I think there's a lot of education that still needs to happen to really go there.
I think aside for the parents in the room too, one of the very interesting facts is that Riot is sending 500 students to college on League of Legends scholarships now. And so what does that do to your advice to your kids about playing video games, right? Should they study or should they play video games, right?
That's right.
That's a good one.
I mean, there is something about the game of League of Legends, and Overwatch has a lot of these attributes as well, that there are deep layers of strategy and critical thinking. So it's not just that these esports scholarships for college mean that necessarily those 500 people are going to get a professional contract, but it says an awful lot about that person's cognitive potential and a whole range of career options that are available. So it's quite a good metric for kind of the brain power of that individual.
Yeah, we have a group at Blizzard called TESPA. It's our collegiate esports, and across all of the chapters, I don't know the exact number, I think we have 400 or so chapters across the country. Almost 2/3 of the people that participate in our collegiate esports are STEM majors. So
yeah, it's interesting. One of the more popular conversations we've been having, both with the publishers and the professional teams, which are really our two most important stakeholders for us, being the amateur league system underneath, but very popular conversation about the under 18 market. So, you know, we, in addition to our youth league, are starting to run high school league competitions as well. Why does that matter to the pro teams? Well, actually finding you around 16 to 18 is an important time, because while of course, you know, Tom Brady's a quarterback at 40, the life of a professional esports athlete will grow as well. Right now, it tends to be that kind of the heart of their career is in that 20 to 24-year-old range. And so, you know, that's important. But then, as I alluded to earlier, the kid who plays Little League is going to be a Major League Baseball fan for life. And so the importance of introducing, you know, the kind of future esports fan is an important role as well. And when you get to the game publishers, you know, once you join a league and you participate in a sport in a different way, I always jokingly say I played tennis growing up, and I could have learned to play tennis hitting a ball against the garage door. But, you know, something different happened when I joined a team, the stickiness that I felt around that sport. And also there's character building and teamwork and all those other good attributes. And so, you know, when you're trying to get people to introduce people to game titles and to these sports and to get them to stay with that sport for a long time, sometimes being a part of a league and a team is a good way to do that.
And Dean, can I add to that?
Yeah.
So we're seeing the evolution of, there's now esports organizations across high school, there's collegiate esports, and now at the professional level, the kind of the professionalism, the salaries, the compensations have become very real. I think Nate, you've done a great job with the Overwatch League of setting minimum requirements, and so we have salaries that are in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for our esports players, health benefits, 401k, kind of all the types of benefits that you would associate with professional players. I mean, just to put this in perspective, you know, within the leagues that we play in, there's a player who we compete against, goes by the name of Faker. I mean, he's reported to be making over $5 million a year. right? So this is not just kids in a basement playing. There are real salaries, real paths, career paths for people to kind of grow up and have real careers. And this is just the start.
It's totally right. And part of it is, in addition to the incredible focus and cognitive ability that you have to play these games. So we had this video running over there earlier of one of the matches, and there's this player named Birdring. I promise you, not a single person in this room is physically capable of doing what he does. Like, you could spend the next year doing nothing but playing Overwatch. You still will be not. He could close his eyes and destroy you. It's the reaction time, the ability to literally move a cursor to an exact precise point in fractions of a second. There's a physical component to this, and these players work incredibly hard. They spend a lot of time practicing, but I think one of the other things that speaks to the professionalization of esports, in the Overwatch League, we have multiple teams. They just don't have coaches. They have performance coaches, they have chefs, they have nutritionists, they have team psychologists that come in and work with the players. There's a ton of infrastructure around the pro players to help them succeed, and I think you see the teams in esports that are most successful are the teams that are investing the most in the resources around the players and treating them just like the professional athletes that they are.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that for any of you new to esports that, again, to overuse the word, we can debunk here today, it's that it's no different than traditional sports. The difference between what makes a good and a great athlete is all the additional dimensions of commitment, hard work, practice, being coachable, being a good team player. It's all of those extra layers of like the emotional intelligence, the resiliency, and those things can only happen through the structure of these great professional leagues and all the other resources and support they've put around these people to really push them to reach their maximum potential.
So I've piled up a bunch of questions for each one of you, and I think maybe I just rapid fire just ask every one of you, like how do you decide what a great venue is going to be? How do you build local affinity for esports? How's mobile ever going to take off? It's like the edge of the edge, right? How do you spin up a league where you do have local affinities going on? And how do you spin up a team? Tell me. All right, let's start here.
So optimal venue is a multivariable equation. It's going to depend upon the type of game, the expectation of how large the crowd is going to be, where you are geographically. What plays well in Berlin is different than what plays well in Stockholm, is different than what plays well in Los Angeles. So start with that, with an understanding what it is that you're presenting to the world and what the fan base is and how many people you expect to be there. Then you get into the logistics and the technology of how do you deliver in a way that is immersive. That's incredibly important for us because the experience is intensely enhanced if people feel that they're truly in the game. So if it's just going to be one-dimensional, just looking forward, there isn't sound, there isn't a touch and feel that makes you feel that you're really part of everything, that's going to backfire on you, and you're not going to get these same people to talk to their friends and come back themselves again. And so just by way of example for Immortals, and particularly for LA Valiant, it's not that the Microsoft Theater is their home venue. The entirety of LA Live is their home venue. And we will do things in 200 seaters, in 500 seaters, in 1,000 seaters, in 4,000 seaters, and 18,000 seaters. And it's all going to depend upon who's there, what are we doing? Is it a practice session where we've got some of the Lakers involved or some of the Kings involved? Is it a grand finale where we're competing against one of the best teams in the world?
Great. How do you build local affinity? So we spotted insight a few years back, very similarly to the guys at Activision Blizzard did with the Overwatch League, which was there was a lack of locality to gaming, that very hyper-fragmented, and that gamers had a desire to self-identify. So we introduced as well for our amateur league system city-based teams or clubs. And for us, what's really unique about that is this is the unifying umbrella for all of our game titles. So whether it's 6 to 14-year-olds playing in our youth league and playing around the game Minecraft, or it's 16 to 30-year-olds playing around League of Legends or other titles we're introducing soon, everybody who plays in LA is a member of the LA Shockwaves. So we have a member of our LA Shockwaves right there because I see Monkey Man in the front row. But it's important in a way, and I think, again, this was a moment that was a bit of a breakthrough for us. Early days, we thought we can't possibly have a 30-year-old identifying to a brand, call it the Shockwaves, and having a cute little fresh-faced 10-year-old and their parents identifying to that same brand. You know, there's this edginess to some of the older game titles that you can't really mix with like the apple pie of Minecraft. But what we realized through the city clubs was that actually that is like the beautiful, positive, unifying umbrella. So I always overuse the analogy that now if I do have one of my hardcore LOL players walking down the street, he's 28, he's wearing his LA Shockwaves jersey, he passes Monkey Man wearing his, he just thinks he's Kobe Bryant and you're a Lakers fan, right? So it works. But in a really neat way, I think it kind of flips the problem on its head. It allows two very different demographics to identify with each other, to spot the one thing they do have in common, which is a love of gaming. And in a strange way, kind of turns it into a bit of a mentor-mentee relationship. And, you know, look, the younger Overwatch player probably played Minecraft. So it's a very natural way to start to identify and show the path and progression that people make from those earliest games that get them positively engaged in good gaming through to kind of games that could start to create new futures for them.
So mobile esports, I very strongly believe that mobile is going to be the new frontier for esports. I don't think PC or console is going to go away anytime soon. They're still seeing steady growth, but if you look at the numbers, mobile is really outpacing that growth. And if you look at your younger generation, a lot of the kids growing up today, they may not even have a PC anymore at home. They may not even invest into a console. Technology has come such a long way that the kind of games you can play on mobile today are so good that they can start to compete with what's happening on your more traditional mediums. It's interesting if we look at countries that do not have a strong history of having PC or console gaming, especially in Asia. China is huge when it comes to mobile. Tencent's most successful game in China, Honor of Kings, has about 200 million active monthly players. Those numbers are just ginormous. Tencent has just started to set up a league in a very similar structure to Overwatch. It's franchised in China, and I think it's really just a matter of time until we hit that critical mass in the West. I don't know how long it's going to take. We're really just starting to explore how it's going to work here. It might be a bit slower than what we've seen in Asia, but I'm definitely convinced that it's going to happen.
Yeah, little known fact, I guess, is that mobile gaming is now half of all gaming, right? It's a $70 billion business out of the 138 billion, right? So, hey.
How do you start a league? It's super easy. I get to do panels and talks like this all the time, and I get way too much credit for launching the league. Launching a league like the Overwatch League is, you know, countless hours of work from a huge team across the entire organization. And I would say one of the most important pieces of the puzzle of launching the league was getting great team owners. So franchising the Overwatch League, we wanted to make sure, first and foremost, that we had great operators. Running an esports team, it's not an investment. It's not a thing that you're going to put money in and get money out. It's like a sports team. You need to operate it. And so we wanted to make sure that we had world-class operators who were going to help us launch the league and do that together, because we're not going to be able to build fandom in New York and Boston and Seoul and Shanghai unless we have great team owners that are going to be investing in growing in those markets. So I think, you know, what really it took to launch the Overwatch League was getting the structure right, making sure that we had a structure that was attractive to outside investment, a structure that was going to really be one that's oriented around value creation for all stakeholders involved. And from an operations perspective, I think we've built a team around the Overwatch League that is able to learn from Blizzard's 20-year history in esports. You know, the original StarCraft is, to a lot of people, the first esport. Like, it's a game that came out in 1998. And so we have 2 decades of learning about how to operate esports events from a very tactical standpoint. But we've also built a team around the Overwatch League with a lot of folks from traditional sports and media. and we have folks on our team from the NBA and from Fox Sports and places like that, and sort of the combination of everything we know about gaming and esports and esports communities with best-in-class operators at the team level from traditional sports and media and within our team. We think that's really part of our special sauce around the Overwatch League.
Now, there is a little tougher question for you, which is, what happens when the Fortnite League comes along and steals part of your audience, right?
Well, so I think So first part of your question, what happens when the Fortnite League comes along? That's cool. I like Fortnite. Second part of your question, I disagree with, because I don't think esports is a zero-sum game. There's a tremendous amount of audience out there. And I think what you see this play out now. Go to Twitch on a Saturday and you have 150 to 200,000 concurrent people watching Overwatch and League of Legends and Ninja play Fortnite. And we're definitely going to have, I think, over the next few years, we're going to end up with sort of the tier 1 esports, the NBA, the NFL, MLB, NHL. But there's also going to be a tranche below that that's dozens of games that all have hardcore dedicated audiences that maybe are not on those scales from an audience or revenue perspective, but are going to be thriving esports scenes. So I think we're still at the rising tide lifts all the boats phase of esports development. I think there's still a lot of work to do as an industry, but overall, I think we're in a good spot. And I think the work that folks like Ann are doing at Super League Gaming, the thing that's exciting to me, I have a son who's about to turn 8. They play Roblox now. That's all they play. They don't play Minecraft anymore. But him and all his friends, and I look at the Blizzard Arena every Friday and Saturday when we have tons of 12, 13, 14-year-olds there. These kids are not going to magically start watching football when they turn 25. They're not going to all of a sudden become 30 and be like, oh, now I'm going to watch TV. It's not going to change. These kids are growing up watching the Overwatch League, watching League of Legends, watching King of Glory, and they're going to be fans for life in the same way that I, for some reason, am still a San Diego Padre fan because my dad made me watch the San Diego Padres. That stuck with me my whole life, and that's the big shift that's happening right now is through Twitch, through YouTube, through Huya and Douyu in China, and all these different platforms. This is what kids watch today, and it's premium content. I think that's the thing that people miss. They think, oh, it's a guy, that Ninja thing. It's like a guy in his house playing video games. This is premium content. I promise you, the young guy in the front row here, he thinks that is significantly more premium than anything on ABC, CBS, and NBC. And that's just not going to change.
Yeah, the traditional entertainment leaders were on stage here yesterday, and I think the thing that's scaring them is that millennials are not watching, right? The TV, they can't be found on TV. Where are they going? Where are these millennials watching things? And it's online and it's esports, right? And so the fact that the traditional sports owners are coming in some ways, they're sort of reading some of the writing on the wall, right? That they may be facing a declining future over time.
Can I just one quick other element of what I think has been the true success with respect to the Overwatch League? We're in a number of traditional sports and leagues, NBA, NHL, and we were there at the beginning of MLS and have ridden it to where it is today. And the big differentiator in one respect with respect to legacy sports and things like esports is you now have in the hands of the publishers, they quite literally own the sport. And so to successfully build a league, the most critical thing is to create an alignment of incentives with those people that are coming in to invest in teams. Mm-hmm. Because if the feeling is that somebody can steal the rug out from under you at any old time and just say, it's my ball and I'm coming home, we're not going to extend ourselves to build it out. And I think that's been a terrific job that Activision Blizzard has done in that regard for folks like us that have come into the league.
Yep. Kent, spinning up teams.
So, building teams. Building teams is it's a commitment. It's a commitment of capital, it's a commitment of resources, and it's a commitment of time, right? So if you think about building teams, you want to have a framework by which you kind of look at it and think about, where am I going to invest? Where am I going to put my capital? Where am I going to put my resources? So we have a relatively simple framework that we use, kind of a three-pronged framework. First, we look at the game, right? Is the game conducive to an esport? Is it conducive to aggregating a large audience? And is it conducive to having longevity so that you can play for a long time? And these are all questions that investors often ask, right? So you're seeing popularity in games. There's a game mentioned earlier called Fortnite, which is shooting through the roof, rocket ship growth, relatively new, and a lot of excitement behind that. So obviously the esports owners were looking at that. But the other thing to think about too is also longevity, right? This is a question I hear all the time of, like, why are you investing in esports? It's not like the NBA, that's been around for a long time. Is the game going to go away next year? How are you just going to start another team? How does that work? But you have to look at like the core esports games that are out there. Dota, Counter-Strike, League of Legends. These games have been out in the market for over 10 years, and they're still growing. Right? These are, and Overwatch, I am fully committed that you guys are going to,
And two of those games you mentioned are actually a mod of a game that we launched in 2000.
There you go. Right? And so the big esports games, once again, decades old, continue to grow, right? So you want to look at those hallmarks of, is the game a game I want to invest in and kind of get behind? The next element is the league structure and the operations and the tournament infrastructure. Like, if I do have a team, where are they going to play, right? And are there tournaments? Are there games? So you want to make sure that there's a league, kind of a healthy infrastructure or the potential for a league infrastructure. And then I would say what's most important for us as a team ownership group, and I've heard this echoed many, many times, is franchises, right? The ability to go in, and even though it's a much higher capital expenditure, like so what we've done with the Overwatch League or with others is where you're writing a very big check, but you're securing the rights.
$28 million, right?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Either can I.
But you're securing kind of the rights in perpetuity for something, right? With the Overwatch League, it's we own Seoul for our team. With others, you have an exclusive number of franchises, and that allows you as a team owner to invest, to make long-term investments, invest in the teams, the coaches, but also bring on partners, right? Like, our business is driven by sponsors and by streaming rights and other things similar to what you would see in traditional sports teams. We need be able to make those long-term commitments so we can kind of create those long-term revenue streams, and also on the fan side, build those long-term relationships with fans. So for us, if there is a game that has all the hallmarks of being a great esport, and there's a franchise opportunity for us, we're definitely looking at it, right? So those are the first two prongs. The third is, for us, is can we build a championship team? Can we build a competitive team that goes out there and can play? Our business, we've focused in Asia and bringing kind of the Asian esports players to a global stage. So we have the advantage of some of the games that are great in esports, and there are some championship players there that in Asia that we're bringing west. But that's not true for all games, right? PC adoption far outpaced console adoption. So when you get to some of the console-based games, we don't have as healthy of a pool of players. So for us, it's the game, the league, and the kind of the franchise opportunity, and then can we pull together a great team that can be competitive at the highest echelon? So that's how we think about team building.
So I'd like to ask if the audience has any questions right now. I've got some more that I can ask while we're spinning that up. But so it's right here.
Yes. Hello. Yes, so I work for gaming headphone manufacturing.
A little louder, please.
I work for a gaming headphone manufacturing company. How does the panel suggest that peripherals and people who want to invest marketing dollars in the esports world interact with the teams or the leagues or the arenas or the personalities themselves? What's the best
You come talk to me, and you're happy to have you as a sponsor.
No, I'll jump in on that real quick. I think the keyboard, the mouse, the headset, this is the bat, the glove, the basketball shoes for esports, right? Like this is performance equipment. Every single player has their preference around that. And it's always been amazing to me that we haven't yet got to the point, and I think we'll get there very soon, Kent has a player on his team is very, very famous named Ru Jae-hong, and there should totally be a Ru Jae-hong pro model mouse that I can go buy. And if I'm a kid and I look up to him and I want to use the same gear that my favorite pro player uses, I should be able to go buy that mouse. And I think we're going to rapidly get there, both from doing with folks like you doing deals with individual teams, individual players, and then at the league level, something that Steve touched on. You know, we own the ball, and so from publisher perspective and from a league perspective, we can do deals that you can't do in traditional sports. It's hard to go do you couldn't go do a basketball shoe deal for every player in the NBA. We can do things like that in esports, and so I think the players are really going to start to become stars. I mean, they already are to those of us in the community, but I think they're going to start to break out, and I think that's where you're going to start to see, in the same way that, you know, I can go buy Kyrie Irving's shoe, I want to be able to buy Jae-hong's mouse.
Yeah, and we just a few weeks ago announced a multi-year partnership with Logitech, who bought Astro. You know, what we hold in common at the highest kind of brand mission point of view with their CEO and their head of their gaming business is this belief that there should emerge a legitimate path to the pros. And we think that one of the best ways to identify who a competitive gamer is. So of 2.6 billion gamers in the world, how many of those people identify as competitive? Well, it probably means you've invested in your first peripheral. So we think that that's a really common way to try to hone in on who that audience is and how to start to provide different experiences for them.
Another question? Right here in front. Excuse me.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions for Nate. How is the ecosystem kind of incentivized to work together? And can you give us just some kind of an update on Overwatch? And then also, there's a view that the publishers own most of the profits in this business. So I wanted to ask Anne, how, obviously you have permission, or you must have permission from Riot and Microsoft. Why is that? And how, where else might you expand?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I think what's really important to us is that we set up a clear path to pro. We actually have there's a team on my team that is called the Path to Pro team. And so when we think about that ecosystem, it all starts in the game client, people playing Overwatch at home in competitive play. And we wanted to make sure that we give people a jumping off point. If you decide, hey, I'm getting good, I want to take the next step, you actually know the steps that you need to take to be a pro gamer. So we're trying to be thoughtful about how do we set that up. From an ecosystem perspective, we still do work with third parties, and we do events. There's hundreds and hundreds of Overwatch events that happen around the world that most people don't know about. It's a small 4-team tournament in Belgium that happens during a game conference and all those sorts of things. And for us, we view anyone who's participating in competitive Overwatch at any level. We think that that's a future fan of the Overwatch League, a future core fan. And so we want to do everything we can from an ecosystem perspective to incentivize players to take that next step, participate in Open Division, which is the first step out of the game client. Get good enough, you could participate in Contenders Trials, make it to Overwatch Contenders, which is our regional minor leagues that we run in 7 regions around the world. And if you get good enough, you could get signed by one of the Overwatch League teams. And I think we've done a good job so far of incentivizing players to participate in that. There's prizing at all levels of those. We have it really ramps up the higher you get up the path, because we can't expect somebody to have to work a full-time job and also have enough time to become a pro gamer. So many of our Overwatch League teams also have academy teams where they have players who are either not old enough to be in the Overwatch League or players that they're developing. So we think we're really in the first inning. We're like in the first pitch of the first inning in terms of developing that ecosystem. But down the road, we think all of the opportunity that you see in football, basketball, baseball, soccer is going to exist not just in esports broadly, but in all of the individual esports, because esports is not a sport, Overwatch is a sport, League of Legends is a sport, Hearthstone's a sport, all of the individual games are sports.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so obviously with the publishers, for, at the end of the day, very crudely, they want to get more people playing their game and get you to play it longer, right? So with Microsoft, who owns Minecraft, we wrapped a competitive kind of team layer around it. It's not a true kind of esport, obviously. But in doing so, we kind of create a premium experience that gets people to play the game longer and in a different, more heightened competitive way. And we were very careful with that brand out of the gate because we knew Microsoft would come knocking. It was January 7th, 2016 when I got a cease and desist letter from them. So, we give out scholarships around the tournaments and really make it about positive, inclusive gameplay. When it comes to Riot and League of Legends, again, we had to prove that we were really adding a premium experience. The ranked player, their kind of power user, was calling for their version of LCS. So they were saying, look, if you want me to keep investing the hours I'm investing online, then I want a new way to participate in it. But another interesting stat is that we just ran an event on Saturday for the Tribeca Film Festival, and it was a borough v. borough competition. The New York Excel guys came out, which was great. And we got about 20% of the participation for League of Legends was female. And that's pretty significant. That's a game that classically, because of the anonymity online, has a lot of toxicity. And so again, I think a lot of times the publishers see us, rightfully so, as just another extension of their local marketing arm, introducing new audiences and creating a way for them to play the game, maybe in a little bit more of a accessible environment.
I think we've got time for one more, right there in the middle.
So how do you see marketers fit into this esports landscape? So how can brands advertise in esports? It's a growing area for a lot of brands, and there's a lot of interest, but finding the right approach, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of toxicity, so certain brands might not want to be relevant with first-person shooting games and things like that. So I'd love to hear about best practices or just your POV on that.
I mean, certainly one thing I'd just say quickly is I think what's the kind of nice thing about our kind of mainstream everyday gamer, competitive gamer approach is it does allow a lot of non-endemics that have been sitting on the edge. They want to get closer to gamers, but they don't know how. It's a safe entry point. So hence like our relationship with Mattel and Hot Wheels and Nickelodeon I mentioned earlier. So we hope that what we're doing is creating that first entry point that then kind of helps them dips their toe in the water into esports and then finds a natural way for them to grow into the professional level, which is just a little bit more of something that's unknown to them. I had dinner last night with the head of Nestle North America about what are the ways that we can bring some of their brands in. So I hope that we're doing something good by giving a counterweight opportunity for brands who are on the edges.
Ken?
Yeah. So when you think about the audience for esports, I mean, a large part of it is this millennial audience, and it's a massively huge audience. And you think about their entertainment consumption habits, it's very fragmented. They use ad blockers, they're watching things on their phone, they're using social media, right? It is a hard demographic to go after. But it's a very, lucrative and important demographic for many major brands out there. And now when you have esports and you have both from what they play, what they watch, and what they talk about, you have the ability to now kind of be part of their life and their experience, right? So esports becomes kind of this gateway to tap into kind of a very key demographic. So what you're starting to see is major brands moving into kind of the esports market. And similar to how Dean writes an article every 2 weeks about esports, you're hearing announcements of major brands moving into the esports space. Kind of it's a consistent and regular kind of movement. Now it's challenging because do you come in at the team level? Like, do you talk to me? Do you come in at the league level? Do you talk to Nate? Do you come in and, thinking about more kind of globally, like with the Tencent, where do you enter? What are you trying to achieve? Because each one of us offers something slightly different that may be compelling or not to a certain brand. So I think that there's a lot of learning, but it's an incredible opportunity for major brands to get into the space.
And I would just add 2 seconds. I know we're out of time, but I think the way that brands activate, I'm biased, obviously. I think our brands, the sponsors that we have, are doing it the best. We're not slapping logos on a broadcast. We're creating branded content that is additive for our fans. So go to overwatchleague.com, watch Access Granted, brought to you by Toyota. Watch Turning Point, brought to you by Sour Patch Kids. Watch Game Set, brought to you by HP. This is all super compelling content that our fans love, that's adding to their experience. And for the brands, it's the best possible activation, because they're getting in front of our audience in an authentic way. They're being attributed with creating this content that's making my experience as an Overwatch League fan even better. And I think that's the way that we've been focused on bringing brands in, is really sitting down with the brand, understanding what their objectives are, and figuring out what is the way that we can activate authentically and create content for our fans that improves their overall experience and results in a great experience for the brand.
And I'll point out one last thing about video games. The biggest enemy of video games historically has been parents, right? And esports makes video games more social, right? And so it's a very interesting thing to think about what advice you're giving your kid, especially when AI is going to eliminate 2/3 of the jobs out there. What should your kid study? Like, what should your kid be good at? Like, maybe they can get paid to play games, or be part of this universe in some way of esports. So that's all.
Thank you.